Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 13 of Outlaw Star. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So last we left off, Gene and company dealt with the McDougalls. Although in truth it wasn't really both of them, it was just the younger brother. And the younger brother had sort of contrived an ambush in an asteroid field, and despite all that, things sort of worked out, although, there's some monkey business going on. The younger McDougal brother tried to hack into the Outlaw Star and consequently Malfina, but before anything could really come of that, they kind of broke off. So, Gene and the crew of the Outlaw Star are sort of continuing as they had been, looking for work and things like that, and trying to find out more about the galactic ley line, and the McDougalls just sort of left to lick their wounds. Not that they had lost per se, but things were far closer to a stalemate than they probably would have liked. So now I suppose we're just going to pick up with Gene and whatever the crew's getting into now. Now, I was just doing some thinking, and with the title for the episode like Advanced Guard from an Alien World, I can't help but think that this is going to be a Kataral episode, because sure, Eijitan Clan is nominally on good terms with Gene and all that. I can't help but think to myself that the rest of the Empire is probably, at best, they hold antipathy towards Gene and everyone else. Not on behalf of Eijitan Clan, but just in general. So, I don't know. I mean, it seems like they're just back to their normal base of operations, back to doing stuff, but I guess I wouldn't be surprised if a warship showed up in orbit or something like that. Ooh. It's unfortunate that, they're kind of turning down jobs just because they can't do it. Like, that's a rough thing, because, hauling construction equipment might be a good thing to do, but if you can't do it, then, that's all there is to it. And I imagine, if you load the stuff on a planet, getting out of orbit's probably the most difficult part, whether or not it fits at all. Because, if there's one thing I know about construction equipment, it's not stuff that can be described as dainty. It's normally big and very robust and probably very dense and heavy, too. Alright, so Eijitan Clan shows up to inquire about business. I'm a little surprised Gene didn't immediately riposte with something like, business just got worse. Although it is interesting that she is offering business. I guess the idea is that despite everything, she's still on, reasonably friendly terms with them. But that said, her job is like, go exterminate a dangerous animal from the sewers. Like, I don't know. It could be a ploy to get them killed, you know? You know, on the one hand, it's probably to their credit that Jean and Jim are understandably suspicious of Aisha Clan, but on the other hand, you know, can they really just turn down a paying job? As it turns out, the answer is yes, considering that the paying job doesn't pay for very much. You know, it's interesting that Aisha's complaining about humans being unable to accept a little bit of kindness and charity, seeing as how, you know, I get the distinct impression that her offer was really anything but. You know, it might have been that in her own mind, but I don't know. So unfortunately, Fred Lowe has decided to call up, and while he's not inquiring about the money he's owed, he does have a job, which, you know, given Fred's predilections, I don't know. I feel like they would be wise to think carefully before accepting any jobs. So that's interesting. You know, this client here is essentially trying to smuggle insects. And, you know, I'm no smuggling expert or anything like that, but, you know, I'm under the impression that you really don't want to smuggle animals, particularly animals that have a chance of becoming invasive in a society to which they're not native. And I feel like an insect is probably like almost the worst type of thing for that, you know, because like they can breed like, you know, nobody's business, and they can spread around, and, you know, they carry disease and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. I get the feeling things are gonna go belly up really quickly, and, you know, they're gonna have like, I don't know, Venusian mosquito-borne hepatitis 7, like, spreading through Haifong. And, I don't know. That's not a good thing to have on your conscience. Like, I reckon Gene's probably not all too concerned, but, the authorities would have one thing or another to say about it, probably to his detriment. Alright, so Gene has, perhaps made a bit of a mistake here. He says he's not an investigator, but I feel like investigating, you know, even menial jobs and things like that is probably, not a bad thing to do when you're short on money, because, I mean, I feel like, clients can't be too picky if they're going to, like, you know, 2-bit people to solve problems, you know? I mean, naturally, they would want a good result, but I feel like any result will kind of do in a pinch. Ooh. So this here alien is, he's being kind of shady about what he was smuggling, you know? I mean, he does let Jim in on it, seeing as how Jim was recommended by Fred himself, but, yeah. So, it's unclear whether this alien's referring to the plant or the insect as carnivorous, but seeing as how they're both missing, and how, you know, one or the other or both may have a taste for flesh, that's, not good, you know? I mean, the other thing is that, like, we're assuming the plant isn't mobile and was stolen, but what if it is mobile? You know, it's not like an unprecedented thing in science fiction, but I don't know. Jim's asking the salient questions, but I feel like the client's being a little bit invasive. He's saying it's basically like a cactus, but basically like a cactus is not the same as is a cactus. Yeah, I don't know, man. When you're dealing with extraplanetary flora and fauna, I feel like it would behoove you to be extra careful. And speaking of being extra careful, Aisha Clan has decided to take up that sewer extermination job on her own. And, while she might be singularly qualified in terms of being able to beat the tar out of whatever creature's down here, I feel like she's a distinctly poor match in terms of temperament. Because, naturally, she's assuming this is going to be easy. But if she's in a big sewer, that's a lot of ground to cover, but a big sewer can also accommodate a big animal. Oh dear. So it seems like everyone's just sort of not coordinating with one another and just doing their own thing separately. It's kind of telling that Suzuka doesn't really have anything to do and she's just kind of sitting around. Last I seem to recall, she sort of blew all her money betting on the Outlaw Star and losing. So, despite that windfall she had made earlier by catching that actual criminal where Jean and Jim only caught an imposter, she sort of blew it all, so, even if she was sharing finances with everyone, they'd all be broke anyways. So Gene's just posing as a detective now, essentially. Although given his getup, I can't help but wonder if this is like a little... maybe not a jab necessarily, but a little poke at Cowboy Bebop, because he's got the same sort of suit that Spike would wear, like a blue suit, a yellow shirt underneath. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's certainly stylistically similar. Yeah, I don't recall which came out first, Cowboy Bebop or Outlaw Star. I know they were generally contemporary with one another, but I seem to recall that Outlaw Star had source material, like a manga or something like that, whereas Cowboy Bebop was wholly original. I don't know, maybe this was something that was done for the anime only, just as a little in-joke or something. That would be kind of funny, I do like humor like that, just little nods here and there. Even if it was a jab or something like that, that would be kind of funny too. Oh dear. Okay, so that's interesting. Jean has something of a burgeoning reputation. And I guess, yeah, this must be the ice cream guy who called earlier that Jean ignored. That is something that, something's going on here. That one ice cream vendor is, raking in the sum total of business, and, the other guy is being left to twist in the wind. Although, given that, that shop has that funny-looking cactus, I'd say that probably factors into it. I'm starting to suspect that it's the plant that's carnivorous. Perhaps it's, enthralling people in some way as a prelude to eating them. I guess we'll find out more about that in a little bit. Alright, so... oh wow. According to Jim, the bug they're looking for is over 1 meter long, which... they call it an insect, but I feel like, that really ain't much of an insect, That seems like, more like an arthropod, I think. Arthropod? Something like crustaceans, which are, similar to insects, but they live underwater and stuff like that. Although, given that Aisha has now walked into what seems to be a web, I imagine it's gotta be more like a spider, which, those are technically arachnids. Oh no, this is much worse, actually. It's a chrysalis, or a cocoon. Whatever that insect was, it was previously a larva, and it's about to be something much bigger and more dangerous, no doubt. Yeah, I get the feeling that Aisha, despite her best efforts, are gonna, run into a whole lot of trouble. Speaking of trouble, Jean is just sort of wondering aloud what the deal is with the various ice cream shops. And, it's not like a big thing on his mind or anything, but it's just sort of like a passing thought. And I feel like if he thought about it just a little bit more, maybe he could, come to a conclusion about some strange goings-on. Oh, okay, I see what's going on now. I didn't put two and two together here, but if Aisha destroys the insect they were sent to find, then, yeah, that's it then. Like, Aisha might get some money, but everyone else loses out a whole lot more. And now, more to the point, it seems as though Aisha's struggling with it mentally. She doesn't seem quite like herself. Okay, so I guess Jean will not be arriving to help Aisha or Jim. He's more concerned about that cactus, which is acting out. It seems to just be like shrieking or doing something like that, but I get the feeling that this is, only like the merest thing it can do. It probably has some sort of like bizarre mind control powers. Wow. Alright, so we were informed that the bug would be a meter long, but that's a darn sight more than a meter. That's probably closer to 2 or 3. If it's big enough for Aisha to ride on its back and have room left over, that's a big critter right there. And I think I speak for everyone when I say I'd be a lot happier if things like that didn't exist. I'm pretty sure they don't. Barring except maybe, like, the deep oceans where all sorts of weird, bizarre creatures live, but... man. So I guess it seems as though the bug and the cactus are sort of working symbiotically. Or at the very least, the cactus is looking out for its bug friend. I do find it interesting that it can sort of, like, shriek on command to throw off someone's aim. That's a dangerous thing. Although that said, the cactus itself doesn't seem to be mobile or anything. I feel like if you catch it, or rather, just pick it up, really, if you, have earplugs, that should be the end of it, right? Now, I feel like Aisha is, really barking up the wrong tree here. She's insistent that she gets 500, bits of currency if she kills it. I don't see why Jim wouldn't just offer 500 off the top if they do catch it, just to assuage her. Because surely she's not going to be so married to the concept that she would just, kill it indiscriminately. Alright. Well, there we go then. I guess, the cactus does have some sort of psychic powers. Given that it can cause Jean to, shoot wildly and that it can sort of take over Jim's mind, I guess, man, this is a dangerous little plant. Oh dear, Jean, I feel like hurling expletives at the cactus is not going to work out, So, it's very interesting that the cactus is so megalomaniacal that, just getting people to buy ice cream was it testing its own limits on people. Yeah, I mean, I feel like at this point, catching the cactus is the least of everyone's worries. I feel like you should just, mash that thing. Now, what's very interesting, I suppose, is that Melfina's not affected at all. I guess this sort of plays into her bizarre bioandroid physiology. I wonder why she's not affected, because she should be effectively, biologically identical, right? Like, she is for all intents and purposes human. Oh no. So now it's up to Melfina, like, should she kill the cactus? Should she let it live? Well, that's a good point, actually. Jim is probably compromised. Although that said, it is a shame that, you're going to be out 2,000 bits of currency over this thing. Man, that is pretty brutal that, as a stupid little plant, it can't really do anything to defend itself against Melfina, so she just stomps it to death. I mean, I guess, man, with it able to speak and communicate, at least you know when it's actually truly dead, but boy, that took quite a few stomps, So at this point, it seems like that job is thoroughly squandered. They've killed the cactus, they're going to kill the bug. At least Aisha's going to get paid, but, man. Well, it's a shame that Melfina's, a little unhappy about having a concrete demonstration that she's different from other people, even if it, turned out to be a good and beneficial thing. Wow. So that's interesting. The plant was a one-of-a-kind thing. That's very peculiar that they found it drifting through space in a pod and they assume it's one of a kind and, just like that, it's, dead and buried. I mean, I feel like you didn't necessarily have to kill it, necessarily. I feel like maybe you could have done something, but I don't know, man. If it was so dangerous as to be able to control people and enthrall them like that, I feel like, it's probably not a risk anyone could afford to take, Because, I mean, realistically, how long were they away from the plant ordering people to, attack Melfina, If such a thing were to happen, she certainly wouldn't be able to fight them off, so it's probably good that she got the drop on the plant and it was so bewildered by its lack of an ability to control her that, she was able to kill it. It's interesting that people being unable to accept kindness is a recurring theme here. Not that it's true, strictly speaking, but I find it interesting that Aisha and Suzuka seem to be on the same page here. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.